problem with this survey, it was done on about 80 college sophomore men. And now, I'm not saying that there was anything methodologically wrong with the survey. It's just that I don't want to base my chances of marriage on the opinions of 80 men just out of puberty. So that was part one. Then the other survey was a very large-scale study out of several British universities. It was a lifespan study that said that women with high IQs were less likely to get married. And this was a terrifically well-researched study, and it went over the span of about 75 years. The problem was that this research was valid for women who were born in 1917, I think. So what this was saying is that for women of our grandmother's generation, that this was true, but all these newspaper studies were reporting it as if this was relevant to us. So one of the problems with all these sort of bad news data that the media likes to cover is that they don't do their research. They don't actually look at even the abstracts of these studies. Just look at the dates in which, or the sample sizes, and they were conducted. So what I tried to do with my book is, since I'm a social scientist, I sort of live and breathe for these numbers and large-scale data. I looked at three sources. First of all, U.S. Census data. Every year they come out with this current population survey. So I looked at the most up-to-date numbers you could find there. And that's huge national data. No one's going to argue with the Census Bureau on these sort of national trends. Second thing I did was I specially commissioned a Harris Interactive poll of more than 1,600 high-achieving men and women nationwide. It was nationally representative, and it's a big survey, and first published in my book. And in fact, in the back of the book, I have an appendix that has a lot of the key findings for those of you interested in numbers. And then the third thing I did to get the storyline for the book, I went to 9 different cities, and I talked to more than 100 high-achieving men and women, and got their personal stories. And that, to me, was the most fun part of the book. So that's the storyline. That's sort of, so that was how I counteracted these bad news studies.
Yeah, the one that sounds just fascinating. The one that really surprises me, as you said during your talk, is on the fertility rates. And just, I'm curious what you think. Explain it, just because with the fact that the average woman gets married at 25, and the average high-achieving woman gets married at 30, just knowing like the basics on how much harder it is to get pregnant in your 30s than it is to get pregnant in your 20s, I'm just surprised that there aren't any consequences to that. Do high-achieving women have fewer children?
Yeah, now, this statistic looks at having your own children at home by age 40 to 44.
Okay.
So it doesn't say how many children.
Okay.
So certainly if you marry later, you have a shorter span in which you can't have children, and so you're probably going to have fewer children.
Okay.
But the sort of bad news that we've been hearing is that, you know, high-achieving women will never have any children at all, and they've just missed out on all of this. And while, you know, I'm sure we all know women for whom that is true, on a nationwide scale, it's not happening. These women, and the reason why I think it isn't happening is because these women are getting married in their mid-30s, early 30s. They still have plenty of years of fertility. And in addition, these are women who are more affluent.
Yeah.
And so they have more means in which, you know, to have children. And so I think, you know,
Okay, that makes sense.
Do you interview any men that have the traditional mindset that they want that family? And so, what kind of things did they say?
I did. I actually did. I did interview some men who said that they weren't really interested in high-achieving women, and they said that they were looking for someone who was going to focus on their careers, and they had very good reasons for wanting that. I also interviewed a lot of women who said that they weren't looking for a high-achieving man, that they were looking for a man who was going to help them in their careers. So I think I think the nice thing about, you know, one of the most interesting parts of my research was how what men and women want in a spouse has completely converged. You know, it used to be that the women were saying that they wanted a man who, you know, made more money than they did. If you go onto Match.com now, the amount of men who say that they are looking for a woman who makes more money than they do is astounding. You know, so really, everyone's looking for, you know, the same sort of type person. I think, and what I think that means is that the gender lines of, you know, man as provider, woman as sort of support and help me, that's out the window for this generation.
aren't necessarily married to men who are their intellectual or economic equals. And I've heard the expression, did she settle? That frequently. And did you address any of that?
I did, and one of my least favorite phrases is the marrying down phrase, because that's what a lot of people say. These high-achieving women have to marry down. They're marrying men who don't have the graduate degrees that they do or don't earn as much money. We never heard that about men when women, in previous generations. So I don't see why it should be the case when a woman is marrying a complementary match. So that's the phrase that I like to use. You're not marrying someone for their resume. You're marrying someone because you love them. And that's especially true in the last 20 or 30 years. There's some fascinating research on on mate preferences going back to the 1930s. And through the 1960s, the vast majority of women said that they would marry a man that they didn't love if all other boxes were checked. And when asked that same question now, something like fewer than 20% of women would say yes to that now. So there's really been a change. We're looking for complementary mates. We're looking for love matches, and the paycheck and whether a man has a graduate degree and stuff, that's less important. And these men aren't intimidated by women who earn more or who have more degrees. So I think this is a very good shift, and it's a very sort of healthy shift for our country. And I think we need to move away from the idea that women should only marry up, in that that marry someone with more education or more income, marry a peer, marry someone for love.
You mentioned
Go ahead.
You mentioned about how some men whose mothers and working is more likely to become Muslims, driven and so forth. Do you think that's the most important factor or most effective in
I think there are two key factors. That is certainly true. The high-achieving men in my sample who were married to high-achieving women, something like 78%, statistics in my book, 78% had mothers who worked outside the home as they grew up. So that's one thing. These men, when they think of a woman, they think of a wife, they think of a mother. Work is not, her working outside the home does not conflict with that. The other thing is, think about it. Young men went to school with us. They grew up in classrooms with us. They are at work with us. So I think this, one of the, I guess I'm surprised that no one has said it quite yet here, but in all the other talks, some high-achieving man will raise his hand and say, I had no idea this was a problem. I'm looking for a smart woman. All of my guy friends are looking for a smart woman. Why did you write this book? And then all the women will laugh and say, oh, are you kidding? Or give me your number. I've actually started, like some guy just posted onto my webpage. I have a forum on my webpage saying, I was just at one of Christine Wheelan's talks, and I'm a single man looking for a swan, so here are my demographics. Email me at. So I think I may be running a little high-achieving match.com on my website, so please feel free to join and send profiles. Why not?
I'm reminded of an old saw that says that men like to marry their mothers. And what you have said about demographic shifts and the identity that young men today have of their mothers is probably not the same as the identity that men had of their mothers a generation ago.
Yes.
Is it true that men still want to marry their mothers?
It very well may be true, and that was one of the that was the title of one of Morning Dowd's columns that really got me all riled up, which was "Men Just Want Mommy" or something like that. And my argument is that's fine. If men want to marry their mothers, they probably want to marry a high-achieving woman. So I think that's where I say it's important to give credit where credit is due to the older generation, because they've really laid the groundwork for all this good news. Oh, sorry.
I did skip a bit off on this, but I know the stereotype in the 50s was that you meet your husband in high school. And then around the 70s or 80s, it was you meet your husband in college. So I was just wondering if you happen to find out anything in your research of where these high-achieving women are meeting their husbands now.
Yeah. The bars and the club scene, not the place.